Have you ever been disappointed in God? I mean, like really disappointed in God. I mean, I have. I have been disappointed in God. When I was 25 years old, I was serving a congregation in Wisconsin. It was this beautiful, medium-sized church. The whole building looked like a Norman Rockwell painting on a hill. I was married, happily married, and I had 2 kids. The youth group that I was leading was just crushing it. It was rocking. We had like 40, 50 kids involved in our weekly program. It was unreal for a church that size. I felt used by the Holy Spirit and just aligned to my purpose in the church, like I was doing the work that God called me to do. I felt like I was in the right place and we were just crushing life until all of a sudden, the rug got pulled out from under me and my marriage fell apart. And now not just like fell apart, but like completely combusted, like fully exploded into like a million pieces. You see, all the places that I knew that there were sort of cracks in our foundation, the places that I denied that there were cracks in our foundation kind of broke right open. My marriage was not healthy and it was not good. But here's the thing. I kind of figured that since I was doing so much good work at church, that God would use sort of that as like leverage to like fix my marriage. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed that God would fix my marriage, that God would do whatever it took to fix my marriage. And certainly, you know, with all the work that I was doing, that God could intervene, and fix this relationship. I don't think I've ever prayed for anything so hard up until my life as I did at that moment. But it didn't work. Didn't work. I found myself 25 years old with 2 kids and divorced. I never expected to be divorced. And I'll be honest, I was disappointed in God. I think we all experience this when something doesn't work out, and when something doesn't go how we wanted it to go, we find ourselves disappointed. You know what's the worst is like when your parents say like they're disappointed in you. I sometimes feel disappointed in God. Now, disappointment, it's this emotion that we realize when there's something that we believed would be true, turns out to be untrue. It's a very specific kind of hurt. Disappointment is always unexpected because its primary cause is really our unmet expectations. Suddenly not having those expectations met, it raises questions in our hearts like, why is this thing happening? Or how is this thing happening? Who is responsible for this unmet need, unmet expectation going on in my life? And sometimes when you look around, there's not anybody to blame but God. And so we find ourselves disappointed in God. We'll be like the person who wrote Psalm 42 when they said, my bones suffer moral agony as my foes turn against me, saying to me all day long, where is your God? You see, we expect that God's going to show up in those tough times in our lives. And then when God doesn't show up how we wanted God to, we find ourselves crying out like Jesus on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? Do you not even hear that I am crying? And we find ourselves disappointed. Disappointments all over the Bible. Martha is disappointed in God. You see, her brother Lazarus is sick and she sends a message to Jesus so Jesus can come back and heal. That's how deep Martha's faith is. Like, Jesus, just come back and heal my brother. But Jesus delays. Jesus delays and doesn't come back until Lazarus has already been dead for 4 days, meaning that the stink and the rot of death has already sunk in. And Martha, she runs miles out on the road to meet her friend Jesus. And she goes to him and disappointment comes out of her mouth. And she says, Lord, if you've been here, then my brother wouldn't have died. We get to be disappointed in God sometimes. Things come along and they don't match up with what we expected. Miscarriage, job loss, dementia, divorce. Our life doesn't turn out how we expected. Our kids don't turn out how we expected. Our parents are definitely not what we expected. All those times when we prayed for something and that something didn't happen. But here's the truth. God didn't offer us a disappointment-free life, but instead, God promises us something better. God promises us to be with us in all of it. And I think that that's why Paul wrote in the book of Romans, when he wrote, none of us, when we live to ourselves alone. And none of us, if we die, then we die to ourselves alone. Because if we live, then we live for the Lord. And if we die, then we die to the Lord. So whether we're living or whether we're dying, either way, we belong to the Lord. It's for this very reason Christ died and returned to life, so that God can be the Lord of both the dead and the living. Finally, God proving on the cross that God has got us in all of it, in all of the hope, and all of the disappointment, and all the pain, and all the frustrations, and all the joy, and all of the happiness. God is in all of it, sometimes even at the same time. So if today you find yourself disappointed in God, that's okay. That's okay. Maybe not even just okay. Maybe it's good. Because the truth is that God can handle it. God can handle your disappointment. Go ahead, beam, yell, mad, yell, scream, yell at God if you want. God can take it. But the truth is that God's not just there. God's with you in it, in all of life, through everything that is to come, now and forever.